Imagine living in a world where justice doesn't just fine you or lock you up, it turns you into a walking warning sign. You don't quietly pay a ticket. You're marched through town in a ridiculous outfit. You don't get community service. You're nailed by the ear to a post. For most of history, punishment wasn't about rehabilitation. It was theater. And some of that theater was so bizarre, it sounds like dark comedy from a distance. Take the medieval obsession with shaming. In English and European towns, one of the most common punishments for minor crimes was the pillory, those wooden boards with holes for your head and hands. You'd stand there for hours while neighbors jeered and pelted you with rotten food. It wasn't just discomfort. It was social death, everyone seeing you pinned and helpless. But for scolds, women accused of nagging, or simply being too outspoken, the punishments got even weirder. Enter the ducking stool, a chair fixed to a beam over water. The offender was strapped in and repeatedly dunked in a river or pond while crowds laughed. Sometimes the only crime was embarrassing a husband. If that wasn't enough, there was the scold's bridle. It looked like a metal cage for the head, with a plate that sat on the tongue. Lock it on. And not only are you humiliated in the street, you physically cannot speak without pain. It was a walking gag order turned into a public spectacle. Let us head back to ancient Rome and its own bizarre entry. The punishment of the sack, reserved for those who killed a parent. It was less about simple execution and more about sending a cosmic message. The condemned person was tied up and placed in a leather sack along with live animals. A dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a snake are often mentioned. The sack was then thrown into water. The symbolism was thick. An unnatural crime deserves an unnatural death, cut off from the earth and a proper burial. For centuries, Roman legal writers treated this nightmare fairy tale as a serious, even elegant, sentence. Sometimes the weirdness veers into almost cartoon territory. In medieval Europe, animals themselves could be put on trial. Pigs that killed children might be dressed in tiny clothes, brought before a court, assigned a lawyer, and formally condemned. Swarms of locusts could be excommunicated by a bishop, ordered to leave a vineyard under threat of divine punishment. To us, it's obvious the animals had no idea what was happening. But in a world where law and theology were fused, it reassured people that nothing was beyond the reach of justice. Across the world in China, another strange-looking device made criminals into mobile billboards. The kang. Think of it as a massive square wooden collar, sometimes weighing tens of kilos, locked around a person's neck. It was so wide they couldn't feed themselves. Kind bystanders had to lift food and water to their lips. The person would shuffle through the streets, their name and offense written on the wood. The weirdness here isn't gore. It's the sheer inconvenience weaponized into punishment. Japan had its own mix of the theatrical and the practical. In the Edo period, some repeat offenders weren't just jailed, they were marked. Certain crimes could earn you tattooed symbols on the arm or forehead, permanently branding you as a criminal. Others had half their heads shaved in distinctive patterns that told everyone exactly what kind of offense they committed. You could be technically free, but your own skin and hair were shouting your criminal record to the world. Early America, especially Puritan New England, borrowed and modified these European ideas. Public shaming was cheaper than building big prisons. So you got stocks and pillories on the village green, but also punishments like the scarlet letter, a cloth symbol sewn onto clothing so everyone knew your supposed sin. Adulterers wore an A. Drunkards, AD. Imagine showing up at church every Sunday with your worst decisions stitched to your chest because a court made you. Not all weird punishments are ancient history. In recent decades, some judges, especially in the United States, have experimented with creative sentencing that sounds like a throwback. A man who stole from a church ordered to stand outside it with a sign saying, "I stole from this church." Teens caught vandalizing graves made to clean graveyards for months. These aren't brutal in the historical sense, but they echo the old logic, turn the offender into a living lesson. When you line these punishments up, from ducking stools to kangs to modern shame signs, the common thread isn't just cruelty, it's performance. Societies used weirdness to make punishment memorable, to burn rules into people's minds. You didn't have to read a law code to understand what the scold's bridle was warning you about. You saw, you winced, you adjusted your behavior. We like to think today's justice is more rational, but every time a mugshot goes viral or a creative sentence hits the news, you can feel those old instincts stirring, the urge not just to punish, but to put on a show. Thanks for watching, and if you found this interesting, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the strange side of history. See you next time.